There's an air of familiarity about some of the fans being distant from the artists. This sounds a little bit like sport. Why do you think there's a disconnect between people who might have been well and truly into the musical artists in the past but are not now?
I think content has a lot to do with it. It's both the answer and the problem at the same time. 60% of the content, especially that brands are generating, is considered meaningless to people. That comes from a study that we do called Meaningful Brands that we run globally. 400,000 people, over 30 countries. People are just bombarded. There's so much content out there that they can't get their heads around it, and they can't really discover the unique sort of content that they're looking for.
Does that mean users gravitate to brands they know, existing brands? Are they the ones that are winning at this point in time?
No, not necessarily. In some industries, yes, but in other industries, especially like in beauty, you see sort of like brands invented by, unknown people on influencer media, on social media like Instagram and Snapchat, that are coming out of nowhere and building $250 million businesses in 2 years. They're a big threat to the big, well-known brands.
Are they a flash in the pan though? You get the sense that they got there very quickly. Do they maintain that level of leadership? Is there something they need to be mindful if they get there very quickly, and how they keep the customer on side?
Yeah, I think you have to be mindful of three things. The barrier to entry is your product has to be functional. Regardless of the industry you work in, if the product doesn't work and doesn't deliver what people want, it's never going to be meaningful to people. That's the number one thing. Where I think most brands, whether it be these flash in the pants, kind of brands, or the well-established brands, where they miss the boat is what does the brand do for me as a person? And that can be different. If you're talking to millennials, it's a lot of helps me show off. If you're talking to older people, it can be things like gives me peace of mind. You have to understand what those personal expectations are for each of the targets that you're looking at, and making sure that your brand delivers on those.
To me, this sounds like a problem though, because a lot of these new brands are disruptors. They have some sort of innovative edge, but then that innovation sort of loses its appeal over time as another disruptor comes into the marketplace, or there's a whole series of other competitors where there might have only been one previously. So how fast do these brands need to keep moving to come up with the next best thing?
Yeah.
Because marketing can't solve that, right?
No, but you do have to sort of bring it back to basics. After you've done sort of the hoopla launch and your brand comes out of nowhere and it becomes really successful, you really have to sit back down, get away from all the glamour of it, and really understand what it is that you're trying to drive to improve the quality of people's lives. And that is the same for every industry, whether you're talking about shampoos or utilities.
What's the role of social media in 2018 in terms of building brand appeal? Because it's been a horrible time, let's face it, for social media. Scandal after scandal. Brands are sort of pulling back, saying, well, do I want to be on this platform? If I'm going to be on the platform, how do I monitor it? So
exactly.
What's the role? How do you see all this playing out?
So there's two pieces to social media. One of the things that social media has helped us to identify is what we call the power of earned media, right? 10 years ago or 20 years ago, your mom bought a new car because the neighbor told her they had the same car and it worked out really well, but nobody could track that. Today, with social media, you can actually track what other people are saying about brands, and that has a huge influence on how people move through a purchase funnel to purchase any kind of product. The bad side of that, or let's say that the challenge today, is that these new forms of media, we're still trying to figure out how to do the ROI. How do you prove not just that the person was influenced, but that person's opinion led to somebody else's consideration of the brand or intent to purchase the brand? And that's all a new space in analytics that is now being worked out, so that we get past the views and impressions and start talking about the real impact on people's business.
Here's a curly one. It feels like these are good times for marketers in the sense that consumers have a lot of money. Interest rates are still very, very low. Credit cards are readily available. And people have improving economic conditions globally. Isn't it going to get much harder from here to sell stuff to people when there is a recession, when there is a downturn, people are a little bit more cash strapped? So I feel like marketers, advertisers need to work it out very, very quickly before we get a turn in the cycle.
I think even in times where economies are good, the new generations of consumers are much more fickle, might be the right word. They tend to flip more easily between brands, and they're really looking for a brand to provide a purpose beyond the product they deliver. The expectations are really high. It's a hard time for brands, regardless of whether you've got a good or a bad economy. And in certain industries, bad economies are good. Like one thing I discovered early in my career, that if you work in the biscuits business, sometimes when there's a recession, business is better because people won't pay for the expensive restaurant, but they'll certainly buy themselves a piece of Cadbury chocolate,
Right.
So
the recession-proof areas.
Right, recession-proof, exactly.
I want to ask you too about what this means in terms of the health of the industry, because advertising, marketing, seen huge amount of disruption with technology platforms coming into the mix.
Exactly.
So as they may see the consumer willing to buy product, they are seeing their own industry going through a state of flux. Yeah. What happens from here? Who survives? Who flourishes? Are we seeing a change that will mean players will no longer exist in, say, 5 or 10 years' time?
Yeah, you're right. It's a difficult time. It's a tumultuous time for the advertising world. But I think the agencies that will survive are the ones that fully understand the new ecosystem that we live in, thanks to the digital age, if you will. That it isn't just about paid media anymore, that you have to understand how paid media interacts with the earned media piece, the owned content that the brands are putting out there, and the shared partnerships. All of that works together. It's not silos. So the agencies that understand that and know how to use paid media to push earned, to amplify owned, are the ones that will survive, and also those that step out of traditional advertising into this new content marketing world.
Can we talk a little bit about what Havas and Vivendi are doing? Because it feels like they're sort of going into this new content world, closing the gap between traditional broadcasters and a Netflix, trying to figure out small format, short format content, and then placing brands alongside that content. It's quite an evolution, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a unique place for us to be, because what we're trying to do is bring together all the competencies that you would normally associate with an agency, like, you know, insights and strategy on content and distribution of content, whether that be traditional or non-traditional advertising, as well as the measurement ROI piece, with in the middle this big chunk of wonderful assets of Vivendi, like Gameloft, like Universal Music, where we're doing creativity, you know, and using artists, because at the end of the day, the entertainment business is all about engaging people emotionally. I mean, that's what they do for a living. You know, sometimes the advertising world hits it out of the park with great, you know, Lions and Grand Prix, but the entertainment business does that every day. So bringing those two pieces together puts us in a really unique situation to try and lead that paradigm shift into the content marketing space.
Hello, I'm James Wright. Thanks for watching Marketing Media Money. To check out more online videos, just click on the boxes, and don't forget to subscribe to the CNBC Live channel at the bottom of the screen.